I do want to say something here. I woke up this morning, watched a bit of the Bangladesh-Afghanistan game, and right at the end of that game, I started feeling these really mixed emotions, all right? I was very confused. I wasn't sure if I was happier about India beating Australia yesterday or Afghanistan beating Bangladesh today, which is a win-win in a lot of ways if you think about it. Either way,
everyone goes happy.
Either way, the fact is the Aussies are out. They're gone. And so are Bangladesh. And now we are just waiting to see what happens in the next phase of the tournament. And to be able to sort of dig a little bit into that, we've got another guest on the show. We've got a very special guest today. But India, above all, are into the semis. So cheers.
Salute.
So let's cue the intro now. Welcome to episode number 6 of Spirits and Cricket. Well, if you guys haven't already figured out, we are covering the T20 World Cup, the Men's T20 World Cup 2024 happening in USA and West Indies. And we are now at the business end of the tournament. And what a tournament we've had. I want to say thank you, as I always do, for all your messages, your comments, your feedback. We have been putting out quite a few clips. We have been sharing a lot of our content on socials. We've been getting a lot of fantastic messages. We've been getting a lot of not so fantastic messages, and we don't mind either. So thank you for every kind of message. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to @Spirits and Cricket on YouTube. Make sure to give us a follow on Instagram @Spirits and Cricket. I'll leave links in the description below. You probably see the handles and graphics. Now we're adding graphics to our show. We're adding graphics to our podcast. How cool is that?
Yeah, it is.
Upgrade time. Upgrade. But the tournament shaping up nicely so far, huh?
Yeah.
Do we have any sort of specific complaints, Kirthi? Anything not so? When we can't really complain about the pitches. We can't really complain about the conditions. Actually, we shouldn't be complaining about anything. We're in the semis. The Aussies are gone. What else?
And Bangladesh is also out.
Well,
and Afghanistan is through. The giant killers.
Oh well, look at those guys. They've been a surprise package, haven't they?
They've formally taken over the title of the giant killers.
Yeah. Well, now just to sort of allude back to what we decided to do in our first ever episode was to put a little bet out about the 4 semi-finalists that we predicted at the time.
I just don't want to look back right now. I just don't want to look at it.
Well, I'm going to go back to it. Kirthi predicted India, Australia, England, and West Indies. All right. I predicted India, England, Australia, and South Africa. 3 of my teams are in. 2 of your teams are.
But still, we had the common factor of Australia. Who thought that they wouldn't qualify, right? Yeah.
Anyway, so in order to be able to break all of this down, we have had a fantastic tournament. We've had a really, really good tournament. Maybe I'm saying this because India's still in it. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the India versus England game. We're obviously going to wait and see. And I'm sure that our guest today has got some fantastic insights to give us. Talking about our guest, well, he's a very, very accomplished sports presenter, commentator, journalist, and media producer. He's also provided expertise for organizations such as ESPN Cricinfo, Star Sports, Zee Sports, Disney Star, CNN News 18, and many, many, many more. Apart from regularly covering cricket for both men and women's cricket for associate nations like Afghanistan, Nepal, Scotland, and Kenya, all fantastic teams, he also covers football, by the way. This might be something that you're interested in.
I love to talk about football with him.
And I'm pretty
sure don't get some company.
and I'm pretty sure that he's got some very, very good insight. We will do something called Spirits and Football eventually, maybe. Or maybe we should just pick a different vice. How about women?
All right. I think we both will be in the same podcast for that. Let a chance go.
Anyway, without further ado, guys, please give a warm welcome to our very special guest today on Spirits and Cricket, the uber insightful, the multi-talented, and the intellectually versatile Debayan Sen.
Thank you so much. Very kind words indeed. And I hope to live up to those billings in the next few minutes.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. Debayan, you and I go a long way. In fact, when we first got chatting about coming onto the show, you actually highlighted that it's been 9 years since we last connected. And I've known you since you were doing commentary for us when I was working in broadcast way back then. And we were covering the IPL. And my God, we had some fantastic conversations around all the cricket. And I'm sure it's going to be just another case of catching up on all of that today. And we're so grateful for you to join us and for you to give us all the insights because we have none. All right. So, Debayan, cricket commentator, presenter, journalist. As we do with some of our guests, and we're trying to make it a little bit of a tradition over here, is that we always throw in a little bit of a googly question right up front. And to add to this extremely diverse arsenal of talents, you are also a voiceover artist, is what I've heard. So tell me a little bit more about your career as a VO. I want to know a little bit more.
Oh, the voiceover bit is a little limited in the sense that wherever I've worked, I've normally been used for voiceovers, and when it's been freelance, it's been a lot of like random stuff. For instance, I was just doing a game for All India Radio,
right?
The South Africa West Indies game, and we were talking about what are the pure words to be used in Hindi or in English.
Right.
The legendary Sushil Doshi actually was my co-commentator, and he was asking that,
right,
should I say South Africa or should I say Dakshin Africa? So one of the producers actually said that the thumb rule normally is use the word which is used more in common parlance, because let's not get too technical. So in giving those examples, I mentioned that I had once done a voiceover for a science program or a documentary, and the word for biodiversity in Hindi is Jaiv Vividta. So
my God.
Joking that, how many people would actually get it if you said, Jaiv Vividta par Karyakram?
Wow.
So you would rather say, program on biodiversity. So yeah, it's been stuff like that.
Okay.
I guess being a voiceover artist kind of helps me explore some areas outside of my primary interest. And it's always great fun.
Yeah. Well, it's still playing the guitar as well, I'm guessing. I've seen some videos of you popping up every now and then, singing and playing.
Yes, absolutely. Singing as much as possible. What I've tried to do over the last couple of years maybe is, record at least a couple of songs every day.
Okay.
Hopefully it's getting better, but yeah, it's a very limited audience thus
far.
All right. And it's mostly family, so they don't, say a lot of negative things anyway.
So as if you don't mind me saying this, as a Bengali, if India need to defend 16 runs in the last 3 overs, and you only have options between R.D. Burman, Bapi Lahiri, and S.D. Burman, who are you picking? It's a little bit of a googly question, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't suppose any of them is particularly fit. So who's the least unfit? I would think maybe SD Burman, because he's probably the slimmest of the lot.
Probably. Or maybe you go on the basis of their musical abilities over
But he
there.
had a very bad heart condition for a long majority of his last few years.
Right,
so that
I
might count
understand.
against him.
I understand.
peak SD Burman, I guess.
Fantastic.
The young one, the young SD Burman.
Yeah. Well, all great musicians. I mean, that's the best part about it. Maybe we need to start introducing some sort of a musical component to the show.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah. Well, so I want to get into this massive, humongous celebration, this festival of a tournament called the ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2024. I want to get your thoughts on what you feel about how the tournament has been so far, how the tournament has gone. What do you think are some of the standout moments? I also want to get into that little bit of a shake-up that we ended up seeing in the last episode. Sorry, the last phase of the game, the Super 8 stage, right? So how do you feel? I mean, what do you think about this tournament? It's the first time that we've ever had 20 teams in an ICC tournament, like a major tournament, in my opinion. So tell me how you feel about the ongoing World Cup, and I'm sure you're happy that India is through to the semis. But give me your feed.
Yeah, frankly, as a broadcaster, it kind of beats the fan out of you. So you don't think like an India fan.
Right.
I would be doing that if I weren't associated, but I am doing some matches for the official broadcaster. So in that sense, I'm completely neutral.
Right.
It's been a good World Cup. Obviously, 20 teams is a good thing. The fact that they were all in the main tournament proper, and you got, the likes of PNG, you got the likes of Nepal,
Right.
Scotland, Namibia, playing some of the test nations. That's great for exposure. And we saw because of the conditions largely, but also because there's just so much of knowledge sharing now in T20 cricket that you've had a lot of close contests. I was fortunate enough to do the Nepal-South Africa game, and that was probably the game of the tournament until Afghanistan-Bangladesh came along. I think the T20 World Cup just peaked with that game. I think it's a good thing if we just stop now. Just
what a game.
Declare Afghanistan the champions and let's stop everything.
They would love that too. But,
I'm sure.
In fact, it's interesting. A friend of mine who lives in Bangalore, who's a very senior, HR person. So he messaged me that what's this thing with Indians and their, hatred for Bangladesh and love for Afghanistan. I said, yeah, it's a puzzling one as well. I think it's probably also to do with the fan base, because Bangladesh has a fan base which has irked a lot of Indian fans in the past. But otherwise, and it's a fact that Bangladesh have been largely, the worst underperformers in international cricket. The fact that they are a test playing nation, it's just not matched up to the kind of performances that they've put in.
True.
But anyway, coming back to the World Cup, I agree with you guys. Not too many complaints, but I would point out a few. One is the format, the opacity of the format. Why
are you referring to the seeding rules by any chance?
All of it. Right from the first stages, why are India and Pakistan always grouped together? I think we know the answer. But you would ideally want a World Cup to represent what is a World Cup, that there should be an element of suspense, a little bit of, what is the right word? I'm just looking for, that whole thing about, playing cards, and it's the luck of the draw, right?
Yeah, true.
So if you look at, say, something like, a football World Cup, or even something like UEFA events, Champions League, Europa League, what you have is a proper draw ceremony, which is televised live. So imagine how much popular that would be in cricket if you had a draw ceremony where you had rankings matching some of the teams, and you had different pots. For instance, in this World Cup, you would have 5 pots with 4 teams each, and you would have the top 4, ranked teams at the time of making the draw. And you would have something like whatever, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And the second point, I think, is, absolutely. The precedings for the Super 8 made absolutely no sense. I was just reflecting on this, but imagine, you didn't have any incentive to finish on top of your group in the group stages effectively, which I felt was quite unfair, because I think you should have had carried over points, because then you would have had, it would have resulted in Afghanistan getting knocked out at the expense of Australia, which would have been quite unfortunate, because Australia did top their group. Afghanistan didn't. They lost to West Indies. So West Indies may have actually qualified. So things like that, I think ICC just needs a little bit more transparency overall. I don't think anybody would disagree there. And yes, the scheduling, India always playing day games, that's also a touch unfair on some of the other teams. But sometimes I flip that around and I say that, in the last few major ICC events, if you think about it, India, because it is India and because it's, important for prime time viewership, they've always played the evening games. So they've always had due as a factor, which has not been a factor at all in this T20 World Cup. And it won't be even in the semi-final that they play. Interestingly, which they knew long in advance that they're playing in Guyana. So that was also a little bit ridiculous, really, to be honest. So just these minor complaints. I also believe it's been a really terrible fan experience. So again, it shows that in cricket, the TV audience is given so much of a precedence that you forget sometimes about the fan at the stadium, who is at the core of your sport. They are the ones who have made it a substantial TV audience. So I think these are things which need to be looked at, but I don't expect any action on them soon.
I do understand that there's been a lot of debate and chat about the preceding and even the draw, for that matter, the way that it's been done historically. And I do think that your idea of doing the draw sort of like a live ceremony is going to be great. But I just think that unlike, I think, football, maybe there's one component of it to say that the difference between the top 8 or 9 teams compared to the remaining other 10 teams is very, very vast still. It still has a long way to go, in my opinion. So I think that gap needs to be bridged to some extent before they say, they do it the way that, football does it. Otherwise, in order to be able to sort of have that competition right from the first stage of the of the tournament itself, I think that's kind of critical in a way, right? So I think that's probably one of the reasoning. We all know the other kind of reasoning, which we can't really get into. So just so you know, but I do agree with most of your points. I mean, I think apart from all of that, generally speaking, the tournament has actually been pretty good. Fantastic last game of the Super 8 stage. We had a bit of drama, didn't we? What was the term for it? Gulbadin's rain string coming into play.
I think that's got to be the moment of the World Cup so far. Normally you associate it with a great catch. Akshar Patel took one of those.
Oh yes,
we've seen some outstanding deliveries. I think one which comes to mind: Gudakesh Moti of West Indies bowled a beautiful delivery to Darren Mitchell. If you can,
I think I saw the highlight. Yeah, brilliant, really good one.
Pitched on leg and turned in and sort of hit off. Unfortunately, neither of the teams was England or Australia. Otherwise, it would be a contender for ball of the century. And I mean, Gulbadin's act and just the transparency of it. But interestingly, something which I was actually mentioning just before we were going on air. Umpires are actually empowered under Law 41. They can, penalize a fielding team for unfair play.
Right.
So it was interesting that the umpires didn't think it fit, but it would have just queered the equation, because it would have given 5 penalty runs to Bangladesh in that situation, because effectively what Gulbadin was doing would come under unfair play. But
fair enough.
We do see in cricket that umpires don't actually strictly enforce the letter of the law. I'm sure somebody like an R. Ashwin would have some strong words.
100%.
He always does, doesn't 100%.
He? Yes.
With the mancading and everything, which he's always involved in, he always got a take about the law of the sport. Yeah.
Interesting point that you make there about the law. I did see Rashid sort of coming back. I think he was during the post-match presentation where he said, he's got a hamstring injury or something, but he's fine. Was he trying to cover up for it, or was it was it genuine? I couldn't even tell by the end of the game because of the way he sprinted once they won.
The magic spray worked.
So for one thing, you don't get a cramp out of the blue when you're standing, half squatting at slip. And then you must remember he came on and actually bowled 2 or 3 overs and he picked up a couple of wickets. You had to see how he sprinted when they finished the match. So
I did.
I think
it
the
was
world
just a delaying tactic, which I mean, I think the appropriate word, borrowed from football was shithousery.
Exactly.
Epic shithousery.
Exactly. But that's been the kind of turn. How the kind of highlight of the tournament, I guess, so far in some way or the other.
What do you think about Afghanistan right now? I mean, what has gone right for them? I mean, it's been a terrific tournament for the Afghanistan team. I mean, they have really played well. They've won. They've been the giant killers. They beat New Zealand. They beat Australia, and to top it all, I mean, they performed like they ever could against Bangladesh. Right? I mean, it's been a fantastic tournament. Yeah. What do you think Afghanistan is going to bring in? I mean, they've lacked in one aspect of the sport, is the chase. Right?
Yes.
I mean, 2 games they chased, and both the games, one was against India and another one was against the Windies, right? They were bowled out for 114, and in India also they were bowled out. What do you think Afghanistan can look forward to? Is it that Afghanistan will be praying that they bat first? Or what is it that they're going to carry forward? What will be their strategy for the semi-finals?
So for one thing, we know that the first semi-final, the one that they're playing against South Africa, is effectively in evening, West Indies time. So that brings in a little, different kind of jeopardy, because there is always the possibility of dew. Although I don't think it actually formulates that much in West Indies conditions, because we've seen the wind being a factor. So when it's windy, it's normally not dewy, to go with it. But that being said, I think in any case, what they normally say is in tournament big matches, what helps is having runs on the board. And that's something which I'm sure, as you rightly mentioned, Afghanistan is looking forward to. And to just summarize what's gone right for them, I think you've got good support acts. Because for long, Afghanistan has often been about, solo heroic acts of courage. In batting, somebody like a Rahmanullah Gurbaz, who's also been their standout this time around.
Yes.
He's not had enough support, but we've seen, the way Zadran has been batting alongside him. That's been quite impressive. Ibrahim Zadran and, Rahmanullah Gurbaz, if you said at the start of the tournament that they would be the standout opening pair in a field where you've got, Australia, you've got England, you've got India, who would have believed you? And the second aspect is, of course, the variety in their bowling and the fact that the seamers have come good. You always had, lots of talent in the likes of Naveenul Haq, Fazal Haq Farooqi. Both of them, incidentally, are regulars in the IPL. So, the Indian spectators and the Indian talent scouts as such know about their abilities. But Fazal Haq Farooqi has probably been the standout bowler with the result that there's not been that much of a weight on the shoulders of Rashid Khan or Noor Ahmed. And of course, Mohammad Nabi keeps going on. So they've got those little, players who contribute in pieces. And somebody like a Gulbadin Naib, he's actually a good embodiment of that because he can come in at any position. He can, smack the ball hard with the bat. And he always contributes with, both ball as well as in fielding. So when you have those utility kind of cricketers, you're always going to be a dangerous team. And they've played well together. So there we have to give probably credit to Jonathan Trott. A little bit of due credit also to Ajay Jadeja, who was their consultant during the 50-over World Cup, where they first showed signs that they could actually beat teams on a regular basis. And I thought they were, good for a semi-final spot even there before Glenn Maxwell on one leg happened.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Ajay Jadeja, I just found out they actually mentioned in one of the interviews that Ajay Jadeja actually didn't take a penny for for mentoring the team, in fact, and all he said that if you guys win, that's good enough for me, and that's very kind of him, and that's like and just one more thing, both from Afghanistan, the top scorer in this World Cup is Rahmatullah Gurbaz with 281 runs, and even the top bowler with the maximum amount of wickets is Fazal Haq Farooqi. I mean, that actually shows, right? I mean, what is the team, how they've been playing, and how they've been ideally performing across the tournament.
But this is what I was coming to next, and that is South Africa are not going to take them lightly. That's the important thing about the big semi-final game, T20 World Cup. There's been some weird cracks that have shown up as far as South Africa are concerned. I mean, imagine a situation where Afghanistan win the toss, choose to bat first, put up about say 160, 170. There's pressure on South Africa then with that bowling lineup, bowling the way it is. So what do you think South Africa will be doing to be able to tackle the likes of, this lethal defensive bowling of Afghanistan?
I think right at the outset, obviously the biggest threat for South Africa is the fact that they're not particularly good players of spin. Any of them, the best two players of spin that come to mind are Quinton de Kock and Heinrich Klaassen.
Right.
So when these guys get going, then that they are going to take down spinners, even of the likes of Rashid Khan or Noor Ahmed. They also have Nabi. They're also playing another left-arm spinner, Korate, in the last few matches. So they'll have 4 spin options, potentially 16 overs of spin to contend with. The good thing for them is that Taruba is probably among the West Indies venues which are left now the least responsive to turn. I mean, there is turn, but it's slow. It's not, extravagant, and it's not with great bounce or something. So you have a little bit of time to adjust, which is something that the South Africans will have to take into account. But again, it cycles back to the fact that they are not naturally good players of spin. So you'll see a lot of South African batters when they play spin, they either play from the crease or, they just sort of go in with a Hail Mary and come, advancing down the wicket, not particularly picking it up from the fingers. So those issues will have to be sorted out as a batting unit. But to flip it around, I think what South Africa have going for them is that they have been in a few scraps already in this World Cup. In fact,
they have.
Every match has been, tense
very
and tight.
close.
The way they beat England, the way they beat Nepal, it's just been consistently, one tight match after another. Even the one against West Indies, where they seemed in control after their bowling performance, but then the batters kind of had a bit of a brain freeze, and it just seemed like again the match was going away from them. But I just think that South Africa is a very good unit this time around, and the fact that not many people are talking about them, everybody's expecting them. Now the choke will come. Now the choke will come. And to be very honest, if you're South Africa, you would have much rather face Afghanistan than Australia, because there's definitely a mental block when facing an Australian team, which probably dates back to the 1999, tied semi-final. Like, had that turned the other way, maybe it would have been a hoodoo the other side. But I think this is South Africa's best opportunity. Having said that, though, Afghanistan is also a very good side. So it's a very tight one to call. Maybe if the pitch does support spin, then you would say Afghanistan are slight favorites, maybe 55-45. But their batting has to come good consistently, which has always been a bit of an issue. So it's going to be down to their openers whether they bat first or second. They must, set up a good base. And from there on, the later batters can actually come in and make some decent runs.
Got it. Yeah. Well, That's the preview to semi-final number 1. Shall we move to semi-final number 2, sir?
Yeah, the favorites.
England?
Oh yeah, indeed. We have England in our semi-final spot anyways, right? So, but I mean, before we get into the semi-final too, let's actually look at how India has come this tournament and how they played against Australia. They played like champions against Australia, I felt. I mean, Rohit Sharma's innings, especially the 92 which he scored, was a treat to watch.
Yeah, he broke a lot of records with that, didn't he?
I mean, 8 sixes if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
8 sixes and one lofted cover drive, which was one of the best shots I've seen in the tournament. That can be called the best shot, and followed by Suryakumar Yadav also.
Oh, there was one slog sweep as well over
for Pat Cummins at 110 Ks, which Pat Cummins bowled. He just sweeps him out of the park.
And Ravi Shastri goes, and it just hits the roof like tuck, tuck, tuck. There's Ravi Shastri for you.
Yeah, but we've always spoken about this. I mean, we've been speaking about this, that India has got a lot of cracks, which can be exposed, and a lot of teams ideally are looking to expose it. They should be looking to expose it.
For some reason, correct me if I'm wrong over here, Debayan. Arshdeep always seems to be starting really, really well. His first over, he bowls brilliantly, often gets a wicket there. His next 2 overs, I don't know what happens to him. It's like he's bowling with the wrong arm for some reason. He doesn't seem to be getting either his line right or his length right, and he gets smacked all over the park. The point I'm making is, I mean, what are some of those cracks that we're looking at, and what do they need to fix going into, meeting Mr. Joss Butler, Johnny Bairstow, Phil Salt, Harry Brook coming into form in that last game, Livingston taking the South Africans for a few as well. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy semi-final by any stretch of imagination, but there are some cracks which I think they need to fix. We'll come to Virat Kohli in a second.
Yeah, it's tough. It's going to be tough against England. Obviously, there is the shadow of that semi-final played in Adelaide a couple of years ago as well. But you would believe that the Indian team has evolved since then.
Yeah.
One thing, you no longer have the same, top 3, KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli at 3 classy players, but 3 players who at that stage at least didn't really know how to set a target. So things have changed a little bit.
Right.
Rohit Sharma has brought in this philosophy of going all out attack. And to be very fair, Virat Kohli has bought into it as well. And his low scores in no way kind of, give any sort of indication about what might come in the subsequent games. And I think India has most bases covered. And if you notice how their campaign has been, that subsequently every game has seen some boxes tick. Right from the start, Bumrah has been irrepressible. Since they've started bringing Kuldeep into the 11, that's made a difference.
Yeah.
I would expect India to continue with that combination, since Hardik Pandya is bowling his 3 overs or 4 overs on the trot. So with this Indian team, to circle back to the point which Kirthi was making earlier, you won't get Afghanistan-like stats from this team, because none of the batters are playing for personal records. Nobody's, there to, make 80 or 50 balls or whatever. The idea is to try and go at 200 as much as possible and to keep pressing the accelerator, which is why they're actually playing the extra batting option by including both Jadeja and Akshar.
Got it.
So when the top order knows that you're batting right up till 8, they can take a few more liberties. It's probably the lesson that they've learned from the IPL with, the impact substitute rule.
Right.
The weakness for India, I think, again, it cycles back to the fact that we were talking about, the scheduling. So India effectively have only had really one tough match. Because, unpopular opinion maybe, but this current Pakistan team is probably the weakest that it's ever been in history.
Depends on which side of the border you're on.
No, I think, even if you ask the Pakistan fans, barring the few who are, dedicated supporters, many of them know for a fact that their team currently is probably beset by other problems as well. But largely, it's a very poor team. It's no disrespect to the other teams, but Pakistan is no longer the Pakistan that the 3 of us have grown up knowing. 90s Pakistan was a different beast altogether.
They're all sitting in the comm box.
So India have faced Ireland, they've faced Pakistan, they've faced USA, they've faced Canada, then they've had a relatively easy couple of games against Afghanistan and Bangladesh. Afghanistan, of course, are semi-finalists, but that also came down to a lot of chances and combinations on the last day. But yes, you have to doff your hat to a great performance, very emphatic performance against Australia.
Australia.
So hopefully they'll take the confidence from that And like I mentioned, I don't think there's a lot wrong. I wouldn't, be too harsh on Arshdeep because he's still relatively new in international cricket.
Yeah.
In fact, in 2022, when he played the first, T20 World Cup, I remember the day that India played Pakistan, I was actually doing the morning game that day as well for All India Radio. So I was on my way back to Bangalore, and I was again at Delhi airport when the match was won. And this was when I was with ESPN Cricinfo. So we did a Twitter Spaces immediately after.
Nice.
So before boarding, I spent about 45 minutes speaking to my colleagues and fans and everybody. And I said then that Arshdeep is a big reason why India won that match. And if you recall, so that's another big change, that Jasprit Bumrah wasn't part of that squad. So
yes,
Bumrah is back.
Yeah.
That's a major factor, in India's favor. So I think a lot of things are in favor of India, but it's a knockout game. And England is a very good side. England is a very balanced side.
It is.
Since they've started employing Moeen Ali extremely well, as a floater in the batting as well, in addition to his off spin, it's made them a much more, formidable unit. Jofra Archer is beginning to approach his best. So I think England will also, not feel too underconfident. I think it's a clash of pretty much equals, and it'll boil down to a few minor moments which both teams will have to grab. Looking at their performance against Australia, you would back India to be able to grab those moments.
Any insight on the conditions at Guyana?
So Guyana has always been slightly spin friendly, so that should work to India's advantage. But you have to remember that in Adil Rashid, you've got.
I was going to mention Adil Rashid. I think he had a fantastic tournament. He's bowling extremely well. Yeah. I mean, it's a treat to watch him, man, as a leg spinner and bowling the wrong ones. I mean, he's beautiful. His line and length has been amazing all throughout the tournament, and he's bowled really well.
He's got the ball on a string. You've got Moeen Ali, who's coming good. India have a, I don't think it's ever happened before, but India have something like, 6 left-handers in their 11, if you look at the batters. Because they've got Pant, they've got Dubey, they've got Jadeja, they've got Akshar. I'm missing somebody. I think Arshdeep is also left-handed, so is Kuldeep. So you've got 6 potential bowlers or batters against whom Moeen Ali can come good. And you've got a freak like Livingston who can bowl both leg spin and off spin. So England is beset with choices. They've got good options. Butler is a reasonably, smart T20 captain, goes a lot with things like matchups and everything. So I'm looking forward to that game, provided there is a game. Apparently the forecast is for rain. So that will qualify India through.
I want to mention this. I want to mention this over here. When India picked their squad and when they had so many spinners, such a spinner-heavy squad that they picked, they said that, if India reaches the semi-finals, it's going to be a spin-friendly wicket. And here we are, India are in the semi-finals. They're going to be in a sprint-friendly wicket. We need to see what the spinners do.
Friends, Unagi.
Unagi.
Well, this is win the toss, bat first, bowl first. What do you go with?
In a big game, it really doesn't matter. In a big game, often you hope that you lose the toss because you're sometimes a little confused. India's Achilles heel in knockout matches has often been batting first. So maybe they're thinking that way, that we'll put the opposition in. And you also have to remember that, all the evening games, India time or UAE time, are effectively morning in the West Indies. So that's probably 10:30. That's when there's still some moisture, some freshness in the wicket, which should ideally, work out in favor of your seam bowlers. Whatever little movement is there will be there around that time. So maybe bowl first, hope to bowl first. I think I would expect England also to do that. Right. So it should be interesting unless you think that the pitch will slow down, in which case it always helps to bat first because then it brings your spinners into the play in the second innings.
Like other grounds around the West Indies, is wind a big factor on this ground as well?
It is, because you in the West Indies, one thing which is common is you've got every ground is right by the sea. I mean, some a little closer, some a little further away, but nothing more than say 2 or 3 kilometers. So you've always got that cross breeze blowing. And if you look at the structures of the stadiums as well, they have a lot of these banks, grass banks, and sort of empty spaces. Not many of them are bowl-like in structure. So you'll always have a cross breeze going across. And I think that's been one of the fascinating factors right through this World Cup. How teams have used it, or how some teams have got into a bit of an ego battle, batters in particular, looking to hit into the breeze and then hold out. I think a prime example has been Bangladesh. Some matches which they lost closely, including the one against Afghanistan. I'm sure the batters were guilty of, looking to take on the wind, which sometimes goes at something like 14, 15 kilometers an hour. So good luck, trying to beat that with a shot.
I mean, even Rohit Sharma did that when he got on Akshar Patel, and Akshar Patel bowled that fantastic over of just gave away 3 runs. I mean, he just used the wind. In fact, they were challenging Travis Head to actually hit across, and he was bowling across the wind.
And he had done something similar with Imad Wasim in the Pakistan game. The angle was such that he was challenging Imad Wasim to try and go across the line, but he's not somebody who uses his feet, and apparently he's also been carrying an injury, so he wasn't somebody who was going to dance down the wicket or shuffle across, so he just made it easier for India.
And he trapped him.
That's called a trap for sure. What at this point in time, I know you're neutral,
Yes.
but who do you predict going into the finals out of the 4 teams?
Honestly, I think it's really even, and it's too close to call. But if I were to instinctively think about it, I would say South Africa's experience should see them through, and India just shades it a little bit in terms of quality. But I won't be surprised if I get both wrong.
Yeah, no, fair enough. We've got a lot of things wrong before. It's all fun.
You can edit it out if I get it wrong.
Sure, it goes out before it happens. By the way, that's the only problem.
Okay, for the short clips, then I'll edit. I'll record it.
No worries. We'll wing it. We'll figure something out.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly run through some stuff that you've been up to. Of late, and you mentioned earlier already that you're commentating, and you said you were on Prasar Bharati. You've had a little bit of a stint on Star Sports with the likes of Wasim Jafar as well. How's that been? How's that going for you? Tell us a little bit about your stint of commentating and things like that. And you're also covering some very interesting games, like we mentioned. You cover not just the mainstream cricket, you also cover a lot of the other cricket that's happening around us, which is fascinating to learn about.
Yes, in fact, it's been a while. I remember, I think it was 2013 when I did a few games for the ICC T20 qualifiers for the World Cup in 2014. And these were, of course, in Dubai and Sharjah. That was my first time at the Sharjah Stadium. And I remember walking in and, thinking that, oh, this is a rather small stadium. I mean, when you were kids and when you saw like people smacking sixes, Sachin in the course of those 2 epic innings in 1998. Yeah, you were like, mind boggled and gobsmacked that how is he clearing these boundaries. But just looking at the size of the stadium, you thought that, I wouldn't do so badly either. But I mean, of course, not in any way comparing myself to Sachin. And then I remember an amusing incident. So Afghanistan were playing Nepal in a match. And that was the day. This was probably November 2013. So I don't know if you remember, there was one day when it rained quite significantly. Right. And I think there was a sort of a national emergency which was declared. I used to live in Delhi back then. So I had a flight back to Delhi later that evening. So myself and my co-commentator was an Englishman, elderly Englishman. We took a cab, but the cab refused to go, close to the Sharjah Stadium because the roads were kind of completely swelling up with water. Right. So we rolled up our trousers and we just walked all the way with shoes squelching and everything. And to be fair, there was probably a crowd of about 6,000 or 8,000 even on that day. Okay. It was a sort of working day, but Nepal and Afghanistan, 2 teams with massive support. So the ICC were working overtime to ensure that a game happened, and it did actually. There was a 7-over game eventually, and then I kind of rushed over to the airport. But I remember one moment where I went out to sort of inspect the pitch and conditions, and Mohammad Shehzad was also looking out, and we had a little conversation, and then he started pointing. He started pointing towards the road adjacent to the Sharjah Stadium, and he's like, Saeed Ajmal ko idhar chakka mara stadium ke bahar. So I kind of remembered that game. I think he played a reverse sweep or a sweep, but he sent it out of the stadium. He was quite a character as well. Fantastic. So I mean, it's been fun. It's often doing games with slightly smaller teams is greater fun, both as a journalist and as a broadcaster, because you get to bring out some better stories. Sorry, to answer your question about how it's to do commentary, it's great fun because if you've ever sat with a cricketer, ex-cricketer, they're full of tales, they're full of anecdotes. So the best parts of it, of course, happen off camera. So that's where you have the most fun. And so what I've also done this IPL was something called descriptive feed, where what Star Sports effectively did was they had sign language commentary, which went with the commentary which we were doing for the matches. And it was meant to be descriptive because it was almost like radio, because we had to describe the action also for, say, the visually impaired, fans who were tuning in. So it was great fun. Sometimes we got some cricketers to join us as well. Guys like Deep Das Gupta, I think a couple of others, maybe Ravi Shastri also did a few stints. And then we used to sit in the talent room, which had, multiple language commentators. So unfortunately, this year he didn't join in, but last year we had Sandeep Patil, who was, full of terrific tales from his days as a film star, from days of 1980s and his experience with the World Cup winning team. Krishnamachari Srikanth, as it comes across, is quite a character. You've got Navjot Sidhu. So you've got all these guys. Sunil Gavaskar is a terrific storyteller, and he's extremely sort of generous with his time and energy when he's around people. Ravi Shastri is hilarious, and he's himself. He's always himself. And you've got all these these little sort of what is the right term you could use, but a lot of these Tamil commentators who look quite sharif, so to use the Urdu word. But when you sit with them, they are hilarious. They're full of stories. The likes of Balaji, Badrinath, all these guys are brilliant. Srishant is a bundle of energy. He brings guitars from somewhere, and you end up sort of playing with him. And so it's great fun. It's great fun to just hang around with cricketers, and it's therapeutic sometimes.
Since we are in the middle of another big major tournament around the world, do you have any predictions for that as far as the champions are concerned for the Euros?
I think Spain is looking quite strong. You obviously can never discount France. England has a good, it's got a good batch, but England are just England, so they are probably South Africa in football. So that there's some heartbreak lurking around semi-finals or finals. And I honestly haven't followed too much football lately. So when one of these famous football sites asked for a team to support, I just went with the most random one. So I'm supporting Slovenia, because that's the only underdog I can think of.
Nice. I just have to make a little note over here for our American viewers. By the way, we're talking about soccer, just so you know.
And it's the Euros. It's not a World Series.
So it's just for European teams, all right? Just so Europe is a continent which is right next to Asia. Just so you know.
They must have seen enough of teams this time, right? They're so used to playing in their own country with all the major leagues, and basketball and everything. They just think, yes, Los Angeles, LA Lakers is the best team in the world. I mean,
Well, hopefully Major League Cricket can do some of can improve the visibility and promote cricket a little bit more in the US in that manner. So we're looking forward to that kicking off soon.
Yeah, with so many H1B1s over there, I think everyone's going to be playing cricket.
That's just going to be that's going to be the B side, isn't it?
India H1B1.
India H1B1. Well, that's been up then. Thank you so much, Debayan, for joining us today. I mean, really, really appreciate your time, your insights. It's been really, really fascinating as it always has been when we've even spoken in the past. Always some very, very insightful analysis over here. If you haven't already, please make sure that you give us a subscribe. By the way, we are on YouTube at Spirits and Cricket and on Instagram at Spirits and Cricket. I'll leave a link below. You can go and follow Debayan at Sen Debayan on Instagram. That's where you are predominantly. Is that where you lurk around, a little fly on the wall on Instagram, or posting actively like a influencer that you are? Whatever works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I'm quite agnostic in terms of medium. Whatever I feel like, I just put it out there. So, yeah.
All right. Fantastic. So there we have it. So at Sen Debayan on Instagram, we are Vish and Kirthi. Thank you so much again for all your likes, shares, and comments. We have to say one last good luck to all 4 teams that are in the semi-finals of the ICC Men's T20 World Cup. We just hope that we see some fantastic games as we have seen so far, and it's may the best team win and go through all the way. So thank you so much for tuning into Spirits and Cricket. I'm Vish. This is Kirthi. That's Debayan. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Cheers.